The vending machines still hummed when the emergency broadcast cut to static. I stood in the employee break room of mile 247 rest stop, coffee halfway to my lips, watching my phone screen flood with alerts I couldn't fully process. My name is Derek Holloway, and I'd managed this patch of asphalt and cinder block for 6 years. The job was simple: keep the bathrooms clean, restock the machines, chase off kids spray painting the walls. Nothing in my training manual covered what to do when civilization collapsed on a Tuesday morning. The rest stop sat at the junction of Interstate 40 and State Route 89, equidistant between 3 small towns that probably didn't exist anymore. The facility sprawled across 4 acres, main building with restrooms and vending area, covered picnic pavilions, 2 parking lots that could hold maybe 80 vehicles, and a maintenance shed I used for equipment storage. Semi-trucks used us as a waypoint. Families stopped to let kids run around. The location was unremarkable until it became one of the last points of reference in a world that had lost its landmarks. I walked outside into October sunshine that felt wrong, too normal, too bright. 3 cars idled in the lot. A sedan with Indiana plates, a pickup truck with a camper shell, a minivan with stick-figure family decals on the rear window. The drivers stood in a cluster near the building entrance, all staring at their phones with the same expression of dawning horror. Nobody spoke. The air carried the scent of diesel and fallen leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wailed endlessly. Does anyone know what's actually happening? The speaker was a man in his 40s, wearing a business suit. His tie loosened. His hands trembled badly enough that his phone screen shook. I could see the reflection of red emergency alerts flashing across his face. Reports from Atlanta say hospitals are overrun. This from the pickup driver, a weathered guy with sun-damaged skin and calluses that spoke of decades doing manual labor. People attacking medical staff. The CDC issued shelter-in-place orders for the entire metro area. Then the broadcast just stopped. The minivan driver, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and the soft hands of an office worker, looked toward the interstate with desperate eyes. I'm trying to get to my brother in Knoxville. Are the roads still open? Can anyone get through? For now, I kept my voice steady, using the same tone I'd developed over years of dealing with frustrated travelers and broken air conditioning systems. But cell service is spotty. Last update I saw said avoid major cities. All of them. The infection is spreading faster than anyone predicted. A 4th vehicle pulled into the lot. A delivery truck with a freight company logo, the kind that usually dropped off supplies for my vending machines. The driver climbed down, face pale and streaked with sweat despite the mild temperature. You guys seeing this? I just passed through Coopersville about 40 minutes ago. Place looked like a war zone. People running everywhere. Cars crashed into storefronts. I saw. He stopped, swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Something's wrong with people. They're not acting right. They're not acting human. The businessman's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and went white, the color draining so fast I thought he might collapse. My wife sent a video. Jesus Christ. Those things. They're eating. They're actually. Don't. I cut him off before panic could spread like the infection we were discussing. Don't say it out loud yet. Let's think clearly while we still can. But thinking didn't stop what came next. Over the following hour, the trickle of vehicles became a stream, then nearly a flood. Every car brought new fragments of information, each more horrifying than the last. The dead weren't staying dead. They rose after minutes or hours depending on how they died. Bites caused infection within hours. sometimes faster. Major highways had become parking lots of abandoned vehicles, forcing people onto back roads and secondary routes. The government was gone, or might as well be. Nobody had heard from federal authorities in hours. The military couldn't contain it because there was nothing to contain anymore. The infection had already spread everywhere. The world we knew had ended while we stood in a rest stop parking lot, arguing about which direction to drive. By noon, 23 vehicles crowded my parking lot, arranged in haphazard clusters. People milled around in small groups, arguing about where to go, what to do, whether to trust the information on their dying phones. Some wanted to keep driving, convinced they could outrun the collapse if they just reached the right destination. Others insisted we'd be safer in groups, that scattering across the countryside meant death for everyone. Children cried in back seats. No, wait, there were no children. Everyone here was traveling alone or in small adult groups. The families with kids had left hours ago, probably dead by now. I stood on the concrete bench outside the building and raised my voice, projecting the way I'd learned during my brief stint trying community theater years ago. Listen up. I'm Derek, facility manager for this location. This rest stop has some advantages worth considering. We're far from major population centers, at least 20 miles from anything bigger than a rural town. The building is solid construction, reinforced concrete and cinder block, metal doors, secure foundation. We've got water from a private well system with a backup generator I've maintained personally. Vending machines are fully stocked as of yesterday's delivery. If people want to stay temporarily while figuring out next moves, you're welcome to. No charge, no conditions. For how long? Someone shouted from the back of the crowd. How long can we actually survive here? As long as it makes sense, I replied honestly. Could be days, could be longer. I don't know any more than you do. What about those things? Another voice called. What happens when they find us? We deal with it together, or we die separately. Your choice. Not everyone stayed. The businessman left within minutes of my speech, determined to reach his family 3 states away. I watched him pull onto the interstate heading east, and part of me wanted to call him back, to tell him it was suicide. But I said nothing. The minivan driver departed for Knoxville. Others followed in pairs and alone, unable to accept that stopping might be smarter than running. But 14 vehicles remained, containing 19 men total. We watched the departing cars disappear down the interstate, taillights fading into afternoon haze, and I wondered if we'd made the right choice, or if they had. I still wonder sometimes. The first night taught us fear. We secured what we could with the materials at hand. I had a ring of keys that opened everything on the property, something I'd carried daily for years without considering how valuable it might become. The maintenance shed held tools accumulated over half a decade. Hammers, saws, drills with battery packs, plywood sheets I'd ordered for a renovation project that would never happen, 2x4s left over from repairing picnic tables, and a riding mower that suddenly seemed far less important than fortification. We boarded ground floor windows using the plywood, men who'd been strangers that morning working together with desperate efficiency. The building's main entrance had heavy glass doors, commercial grade, but glass nonetheless. We reinforced them with metal shelving units from the storage area, repositioned as barricades that could be moved if needed but would slow anything trying to force entry. The restrooms had small frosted windows positioned 8 feet off the ground for privacy, too high and narrow to be practical entry points. We were luckier than most. Marcus Webb, the pickup driver with weathered skin, had construction experience written in every efficient movement. He took charge of fortifications with quiet competence that made following his directions feel natural rather than imposed. "We need sight lines," he explained while directing 2 men to clear brush from the parking lot perimeter. "Can't let anything approach without warning. Surprises get people killed." "Parking lot lights work on timers," I told him, pulling out my keys to access the electrical panel in the maintenance closet. "I can set them to stay on all night. We'll burn through generator fuel faster, but we'll see anything coming." "Do it. And we need watches, organized rotations, 4-hour shifts, 2 people per shift. Nobody stays awake alone, and nobody sleeps without someone watching. You military." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. Whatever Marcus had been, he was now the closest thing we had to security expertise. We organized that first night in the main building. 19 men spread across a space designed for brief bathroom stops and vending machine purchases. Some tried to sleep in their vehicles. Others clustered in the covered pavilions outside. I stayed in the employee break room, my unofficial command post, staring at my phone until the battery died and the world's last connection to normal life went dark. Around 2 in the morning, someone screamed. We rushed outside to find one of the college kids. Name was Tyler. I'd learn later, pointing at the tree line beyond the parking lot. Something moved there, shambling and wrong. The parking lot lights revealed enough detail to confirm our worst fears. The thing had been human once, but infection had transformed it into something else. Its movements were jerky and uncoordinated but persistent. It walked toward the light, toward us, driven by instincts nobody understood yet. Should we? Tyler stammered, unable to complete the thought. Marcus raised his hunting rifle with practiced ease. "Stay back. Everyone stay back." The shot cracked across the parking lot, impossibly loud in the night silence. The thing dropped, and Marcus approached carefully, rifle ready for a second shot. He examined the body for a long moment, then returned to our cluster near the building. "Headshot put it down permanently," he reported. "Body's cold, been dead for hours at least before walking. Infection works on corpses, not just living people. Changes things tactically." "How many more are out there?" someone asked. "Assume thousands, maybe tens of thousands." Marcus checked his rifle with mechanical efficiency. "We're going to see more. Everyone needs to understand that right now." We doubled the watch rotation that night. Nobody slept much anyway. I sat in the break room with a flashlight and a notebook, making lists of supplies and problems. Water. We had the well. Probably safe for now. Food. 2 weeks if we rationed strictly. Weapons. Marcus's rifle. 1 pistol belonging to a trucker named James Ortega. Tire irons and improvised clubs. Medical supplies. Basic first aid kit designed for scraped knees. Nothing that could handle serious trauma. Fuel. The generator had maybe 3 days of gasoline left in storage tanks. The list of problems was longer than the list of solutions. If you've ever felt the weight of normal life ending and something darker beginning, you'll understand why I'm telling you this story. Keep watching. This is where it gets real. Hit that subscribe button because what happens next will show you exactly how fast the world changes when there's nobody left to maintain order. The second day brought brutal clarity about our situation. We took inventory at dawn, methodically checking every resource. The vending machines held chips, candy bars, packaged pastries, beef jerky, energy drinks, bottled water and soda. Enough calories for maybe 2 weeks if rationed carefully among 19 men. Not enough for long-term survival. The delivery truck that had stayed contained boxes of canned goods destined for a grocery store that probably didn't need them anymore. Its driver, a compact man named Angelo Chen, offered the cargo freely. "Not like I can deliver it," he said while we unloaded cases of soup and vegetables. "Company's gone. Dispatchers stopped answering yesterday. Might as well keep people alive here instead of letting it rot in the truck." We organized supplies in the employee break room, which became our storage area and distribution center. Shelves held neatly arranged food organized by type and expiration date. I made Angelo the quartermaster. Someone needed to track inventory and prevent hoarding. He accepted the role with the meticulous attention to detail that had probably made him a reliable driver. Marcus suggested we think beyond the immediate crisis. If this doesn't blow over quick, and I don't think it will, we need more than snacks and canned soup. We need real food sources, agriculture, hunting, sustainable supplies. "There's a farm supply store about 8 miles south on Route 89, offered Kyle Morrison, a college kid who'd been driving home when everything fell apart. He had the kind of specific local knowledge that came from growing up rural. I worked there summers during high school. They've got seeds, tools, bulk goods, animal feed. Place is built like a warehouse, concrete and steel, probably secure." "Too risky," argued James Ortega, the trucker with the pistol. "Roads could be crawling with those things. We've seen maybe a dozen around the perimeter. Who knows how many are out there? We'll run out of food either way," Marcus said flatly. "Better to scout while we still have energy and clear-headed thinking. Starvation makes people stupid and desperate." We debated for an hour in the parking lot, voices rising and falling as different factions argued their positions. The risk-averse wanted to wait, to hope for rescue or recovery. The pragmatic understood that hoping accomplished nothing. Finally, Marcus, Kyle, and 2 others, brothers named Michael and Stephen Torres, volunteered for a supply run. They'd take Kyle's truck, bigger than a car but fast enough to escape trouble if they encountered infected. We spent the afternoon reinforcing the truck bed with plywood sides, creating makeshift barriers that might protect the occupants from anything that grabbed on. Marcus distributed weapons, his hunting rifle, James's pistol, tire irons, a baseball bat someone had in their trunk. It felt inadequate and desperate, but it was all we had. They left at dawn the 3rd day. I watched the truck disappear down Route 89 and tried not to think about the dozen ways they could die before returning. The rest of us waited with the particular tension that comes from helplessness. We worked on fortifications, cleared more brush, organized supplies, busy work to avoid confronting our fear. They returned 6 hours later, and my chest unclenched when I saw all 4 men still alive. The truck bed was loaded with 50-pound bags of rice and beans, garden tools, propane tanks, boxes of seeds, medical supplies from the store's first aid section, and miscellaneous goods they grabbed opportunistically. Kyle's face had changed during those 6 hours. Harder, older, with the 1,000-yard stare I'd seen in veterans. "Store was picked over but not empty," he reported while we unloaded supplies. His voice was flat, drained of emotion, front windows smashed, aisles ransacked, but the warehouse section in back was intact. We saw maybe a dozen of those things wandering around the parking lot. Slow, disoriented, easy to avoid if you're careful and quiet. "Any survivors?" I asked, already knowing the answer from his tone. "Farmhouse about 3 miles south of the store. Guy named Theodore Paulson. Older, maybe 65, living alone on a property he's owned for 40 years. He's fortified pretty well. Boarded windows, reinforced doors, chicken coop and greenhouse for food. Smart setup, self-sufficient. He flagged us down when we passed, probably desperate for human contact. Did he want to come here? No. He's staying put, but he's running low on medical supplies, worried about infection from cuts and injuries. Said he'd trade vegetables from his greenhouse for antibiotics or bandages, fresh food for medical goods. Trade? Someone in the crowd laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the afternoon air. We're negotiating economics now? During the apocalypse? But Marcus understood immediately. I saw it in his expression before he spoke. If there are survivors scattered around, there's economy. People need things they don't have. They'll exchange what they do have. We're positioned at a crossroads with infrastructure. That's when it clicked for me, the realization arriving fully formed. The rest stop wasn't just shelter. It was strategic infrastructure in a collapsed world. We had crossroads positioning at the junction of two major routes. We had visibility from the interstate, making us easy to find for anyone still traveling. We had space to accommodate people temporarily. We had water and basic facilities that most survivor camps would lack. We could be more than a hiding place. We could become a hub where the scattered remnants of civilization reconnected. We'd need rules, I said slowly, thinking out loud. Protocols for new arrivals, ways to prevent violence and theft, some kind of system. You're talking about building something permanent, Marcus observed. I'm talking about building something functional. People need structure right now. They need to believe there's order somewhere, that everything hasn't descended into complete chaos. Over the next week, 3 more groups arrived seeking shelter. A pair of brothers from a failed evacuation convoy. Their car running on fumes brought news of highway blockages and military checkpoints that had been overrun. An elderly man traveling with his adult son arrived with hunting skills and knowledge of the surrounding wilderness. 4 college friends who'd been camping in the state forest when the outbreak started showed up with backpacking gear and outdoor survival expertise. Each group brought skills, supplies, and information. We established protocols through trial and necessity. New arrivals surrendered weapons temporarily while we assessed them. It took only one incident of a terrified newcomer nearly shooting someone to convince everyone this was necessary. They contributed to shared labor or supplies in exchange for security and resources. Violence on rest stop property meant immediate expulsion with no appeal or second chances. The rules were simple, because complex systems required enforcement infrastructure we didn't have. You're building government, Marcus observed one evening while we sat in the parking lot watching the sunset. The sky burned orange and red, beautiful in a way that felt obscene given the world's collapse. Making it functional, I corrected, though he wasn't entirely wrong. People need to know what's expected, need consequences for actions. Without that, we're just a mob waiting to turn on each other. You really think this place can provide that, long term? I looked across the parking lot where men worked to dig a garden plot in a cleared area near the South Pavilion, using tools from the farm supply run. Others organized a watch rotation on a whiteboard we'd salvaged from my office. Someone had started a fire in a metal barrel for cooking, carefully controlled and positioned away from structures. It looked almost normal, almost like a community. I think we're going to find out, I said. By week 3, we had 26 men in residence and a growing reputation beyond our immediate area. Theodore from the farmhouse had apparently told someone about the rest stop, who told someone else, who passed the information to other survivors. People started arriving, specifically seeking mile 247, having heard rumors of a safe location that accepted newcomers. They brought news from across the region. The outbreak had consumed major cities within the first 72 hours. Smaller towns fell within 2 weeks, and the military had established quarantine zones that eventually collapsed under the sheer number of infected. Pockets of survivors existed everywhere, isolated and desperate, but few had managed to organize beyond basic survival. Our first real trade negotiation happened on day 23. A man named Raymond Fletcher arrived in a battered SUV with a cracked windshield and dented hood, his teenage son beside him. Raymond had been a pharmacist before the world ended, working at a chain store in a town 30 miles east. When his store was overrun by panicked crowds and then infected, he'd grabbed everything he could carry from the pharmacy section. Now he needed food and shelter. "We've got both," I told him during our initial conversation in the parking lot. Other residents gathered around, curious about the newcomer and what he might offer. "What are you offering in return?" "Medical supplies. Antibiotics, amoxicillin, doxycycline, ciprofloxacin, pain relievers, both over-counter and prescription, bandages, antiseptics, sutures, splints, enough to stock a small clinic for months, maybe longer if we're careful, extremely valuable." I kept my voice neutral, not wanting to seem too eager. "I know." Raymond met my eyes with the directness of someone who'd already lost everything that mattered except his son. "I want safety for my kid. I want to know he'll eat regularly and have a secure place to sleep, that he won't die from infection or violence or random chance. That's worth more than medicine right now. That's worth everything." We negotiated for an hour, working out details while others listened and learned how this new economy functioned. Raymond would stay permanently, manage our medical supplies, and treat injuries and illnesses for rest stop residents and traders. In exchange, he and his son received full shares of food, secure housing in the main building, and protection under our no-violence policy. It set a precedent that would shape everything that followed. Skills and goods could be exchanged for security and resources. Everyone left the negotiation understanding that the rest stop operated on mutual benefit, not charity or force. Word spread through whatever communication networks survivors had established. A mechanic named Douglas Graham arrived 2 weeks later offering vehicle repair services in exchange for food and safety. He set up a workshop in one corner of the parking lot, using tools from his mobile repair van. A former civil engineer named Patrick Zhao helped us improve water filtration and sanitation systems, bringing technical knowledge we desperately needed. A teacher named Henry Cho started organizing knowledge preservation, writing down skills and information in notebooks in case electronic devices failed permanently. Every arrival brought new capabilities. Mile 247 rest stop became more than a survivor camp. It became a trading post where people exchanged goods, information, and services. Travelers stopped to rest, trade, and gather intelligence about safe routes and dangerous areas. Theodore's farm vegetables showed up regularly in exchange for medical supplies and tools. A group of hunters brought fresh meat to trade for ammunition and canned goods. Someone arrived with a working shortwave radio and began monitoring emergency frequencies, sharing information about distant survivor communities. Not everyone liked the arrangement. Some residents thought we should share everything equally, arguing that hoarding and trade created unjust hierarchies during a crisis. Others wanted strict hierarchy with centralized leadership that could make unilateral decisions and enforce them with violence if necessary. Arguments erupted regularly those first months, testing whether our system could survive internal pressure. "This is chaos," complained David Park, one of the college friends who'd arrived during week 1. He'd been a political science major before the world ended and had opinions about governance. "We need actual government, leadership structure, democratic process, or clear authority. This informal trading system is just capitalism with extra steps, and it's going to collapse." "We need what works," I countered, trying to keep frustration from my voice. "People trade naturally. They negotiate. They cooperate when it benefits them. Force them into a system they don't accept, and this place falls apart. We don't have the resources or personnel to enforce complex rules. So we're just capitalists now?" During the apocalypse, while people are dying, we're survivors trying not to kill each other over cans of beans. Call it whatever you want. The system works because people choose to participate, not because anyone forces them. Marcus sided with me, which mattered enormously, because people respected his judgment and feared his capabilities. Derek's right. The rest stop stays neutral ground. No factions forming, no power plays. Everyone trades fairly, everyone stays safe. Simple. "And who enforces that?" David challenged. "Who decides what's fair? Who punishes violations?" Marcus's voice went flat, taking on the tone that preceded violence. "Anyone who breaks the peace leaves. Permanently. First warning is the only warning. That's the enforcement." The real test came on day 38. A group of 7 men arrived in 3 vehicles heavily armed with rifles and pistols, visible even from a distance. Their leader called himself Carter, no last name given, probably not his real name anyway. He was broad-shouldered with a shaved head, scarred knuckles, and eyes that calculated angles and advantages in every situation. His men carried themselves with coordinated precision that suggested military or paramilitary training. "Heard you've got supplies and organization," Carter said after parking in a deliberate formation that controlled sight lines. "Smart setup. Impressive what you've built here." "We get by," I replied carefully, aware that everyone was watching this interaction. "You looking to trade?" "My people control a warehouse complex 15 miles west industrial area that was used for distribution before everything collapsed. We've got food, ammunition, building materials, medical supplies, significant stockpiles. We could use a distribution point for expanding our network. This rest stop is perfectly positioned." "We're not for sale." "Didn't say you were. I'm suggesting cooperation, mutual benefit. You get access to our supplies, we get access to your location and trading network. Everybody benefits from increased resources and security." Marcus materialized at my shoulder, his presence a silent warning. "What's the catch?" Carter smiled without warmth. "No catch, just mutual advantage. Though, naturally, we'd expect some authority over operations here. Can't have our goods distributed without oversight. Need to ensure everything stays organized and efficient." "I'd call it partnership. You'd call it whatever makes you comfortable. Point is, places like this need protection. The world's getting more dangerous every day. More survivors means more competition for resources. More desperate people willing to do desperate things. Be a shame if something happened to your nice setup here." The threat hung in the air like gun smoke. Carter left with his men, engines rumbling as they pulled back onto the interstate, heading west. That night we held an emergency meeting in the parking lot, everyone gathering under the lights to discuss what was obvious to all of us. Carter would return, and next time wouldn't be a negotiation. "We could leave," suggested Michael Torres, one of the brothers who'd arrived early. "Pack up essential supplies and find somewhere else. Start over where nobody knows about us." "Where?" Raymond asked, his pharmacist's logic cutting through panic. "Everywhere has the same problems. At least here we've built something. We have infrastructure and relationships. That's not replaceable. We can't fight them if they come back," someone else argued. 7 armed men against what? Maybe 20 of us, with 3 guns total? It's suicide. "We don't fight them," I said slowly, an idea forming as I spoke. "We make it too costly to attack us. Make them understand that taking this place by force destroys what makes it valuable." Over the next 3 days, we sent messages through our trading network. Kyle drove to Theodore's farm and explained the situation. Marcus contacted a group living in a fortified school building 10 miles north, who'd traded with us before. We reached out to every survivor cluster we knew within a day's travel, carrying the same message. Mile 247 rest stop is neutral ground for trade and information. Help us stay independent, and everyone benefits. Let one group take control, and the trading network collapses. Everyone loses access to a safe meeting point and the resources that flow through it. It was a desperate gamble. I was betting that enough people valued what we'd built to defend it, not for our sake, but for their own interests. Betting that the trading post had become valuable enough to make people risk violence to preserve it. Carter returned on day 42 with his full group, weapons visible and ready. They found 15 additional men at the rest stop, armed and positioned, not residents, traders and allies from surrounding areas. Theodore stood near the main building with a shotgun that looked ancient but functional. A trapper named Eugene, who'd been trading animal pelts, carried a crossbow and had the weathered look of someone who'd survived alone in the wilderness. Others I'd never met had come because they understood what the rest stop represented and what they'd lose if it fell under hostile control. Carter assessed the situation from his vehicle, and I watched his expression shift from confidence to calculation to grudging acceptance. He was smart enough to know a fight here would be costly even if he won, and a rest stop destroyed wasn't valuable to anyone. The trading post only mattered if it remained neutral and accessible. "Seems you've made some friends," Carter observed after a long silence. "Seems you're outnumbered," Marcus replied, rifle held casually but ready. "For now." Carter turned to me specifically, ignoring everyone else. "Offer stands if you change your mind, but you're making enemies you might not be able to afford. Resources get scarcer every week. People get more desperate. You think this collection of farmers and scavengers will protect you when things get really bad? I'll take my chances with allies over bosses," I said. They left without further threats, but everyone knew this wasn't finished. The gathered defenders stayed for 2 days, sharing supplies and information, reinforcing that the rest stop's independence mattered to more than just its residents. Then they dispersed back to their own territories, leaving behind the understanding that we could call on them again if needed. The message was sent. Mile 247 rest stop remained free ground, protected by a network of mutual interest. I know you're wondering how we managed to keep it that way as months passed. Stick with me and hit that subscribe button. The next part will show you exactly how fragile peace becomes when winter arrives and everyone wants what you've built to survive. Winter arrived early that year, bringing cold that tested every system we'd built. The first snow fell in early November, light flurries that dusted the parking lot and melted by noon. Within 2 weeks, we had 6 inches on the ground and temperatures dropping below freezing at night. The rest stop had never been designed for permanent habitation during harsh weather. Our heating system consisted of the building's original electric heaters supplemented by propane space heaters we'd acquired through trade. Fuel consumption became our primary concern. "We're burning through propane faster than we can replace it," Angelo reported during our morning meeting in the break room. His breath misted in the cold air despite the heaters running. "Current usage rate gives us maybe 3 weeks before we're relying entirely on the building's electrical system. And the generator fuel won't last through winter." "What about Theodore's farm?" asked Patrick, the engineer who'd been working on improving our systems. "He's got propane storage for his greenhouse heating?" "Already asked. He needs everything he has to keep his crops alive. Without the greenhouse, he has no trade goods, and we lose our vegetable source." Marcus leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "We need to expand the trading network, find other propane sources or alternative heating methods. Firewood, maybe." "Firewood produces smoke," I pointed out. "Smoke is visible for miles, draws attention we might not want. Cold kills just as dead as infected or hostile survivors," Marcus countered. "We're going to have to accept some risk." We organized cutting parties to harvest deadfall from the surrounding forest. Groups of 4 men would venture out at dawn with axes and saws, staying within a mile of the rest stop, working quickly to gather wood and return before full daylight made them visible. It was dangerous work. The infected still wandered the area, drawn by movement and sound. We lost a man named Peter Walsh during the 3rd week of cutting operations. He'd separated from his group to follow a particularly large fallen tree and encountered 3 infected in a ravine. His screams brought the others running, but they arrived too late. Marcus put him down after he turned, and we buried him in the frozen ground near the tree line. The death sobered everyone. We'd been lucky for months, avoiding major casualties through caution and preparation. Peter's loss reminded us how thin the margin was between survival and extinction. That night, attendance at the evening gathering around our fire barrels swelled as people sought comfort and proximity to others. "We should talk about what happens when someone gets bit," David Park said into the silence. He'd been quiet since our earlier disagreements about governance, but now his political science training emerged. "We need protocols, quarantine procedures, decision-making frameworks for mercy killing." "Nobody's using that term," Raymond interjected sharply. The pharmacist had become protective of medical terminology and ethics. "If someone's infected, we isolate them and monitor symptoms. Maybe I can develop treatments or slow the progression." "You've had months," David pressed. "Have you made any progress understanding the infection?" "Without laboratory equipment or research materials, I'm just guessing. The infection seems viral, spreads through fluid exchange, kills within hours, then reanimates the corpse. Beyond that, I know nothing useful." "Then we need protocols for when, not if, someone gets infected here. Who makes the decision to isolate or euthanize? What's the process?" I watched the discussion unfold, recognizing the necessity but hating every word. We eventually established guidelines. Infection meant immediate quarantine in the maintenance shed, monitored by armed guards. If symptoms progressed to the point of death, the infected person would be restrained and then humanely killed once they turned. Family members or close friends could request to be present but couldn't interfere. It was brutal and clinical, and absolutely necessary. "This feels wrong," muttered Henry, the teacher who'd been documenting survival knowledge. "Making rules about killing people." "We're making rules about protecting people," Marcus corrected. If someone turns inside the main building at night, they could kill dozens before we stop them. This isn't cruelty, it's survival mathematics. Trade volume increased as winter deepened, and isolated survivors realized they couldn't make it alone. We saw new faces almost daily, individuals and small groups arriving with whatever goods they'd salvaged or produced. A man named Russell Bennett showed up with a truck full of lumber from a demolished barn, trading construction materials for food and medical supplies. A group of three brothers arrived with a functioning still, offering to produce disinfectant in exchange for raw materials and shelter. Someone brought solar panels salvaged from a suburban housing development, technology that Patrick immediately recognized as valuable for extending our electrical capacity. The trading post developed its own rhythm and culture. Morning meant inventory checks and work assignments. Midday brought traders from surrounding areas conducting business in the parking lot under loose supervision. Afternoons focused on maintenance, fortification improvements, and resource gathering. Evenings were for community meetings, news sharing, and the social bonding that prevented isolation from destroying us psychologically. We established a communication system using written messages posted on a bulletin board near the main entrance. People advertised goods available for trade, requested specific items, shared news about safe routes or dangerous areas, and posted warnings about hostile groups. The board became the rest stop's central information hub, consulted dozens of times daily. "This reminds me of something," Henry observed while updating the board with new postings. Historical frontier trading posts, places like Fort Laramie or Bent's Fort in the Old West, neutral ground where different groups met to trade. You've essentially recreated that model. Difference is, we're not trading with indigenous peoples, David said with characteristic precision. We're just trying not to die. Neutral ground maintained through mutual benefit. Everyone needs it, so everyone protects it. The comparison stuck in my mind. I'd been thinking of the rest stop as a survival necessity, but Henry was right. We'd built something with historical precedent. The trading post model worked because it served everyone's interests. As long as we maintained neutrality and reliability, people would defend our continued existence. Carter's group probed our defenses twice more before winter fully set in. The first probe came in late November. Two of his men arrived claiming to be independent traders seeking supplies. They asked detailed questions about our stockpiles, defenses, and resident numbers. Marcus identified them immediately and escorted them off the property with a warning that we knew who they worked for. The second probe was more aggressive. 4 men and 2 vehicles blocked the interstate access road, stopping traders and demanding toll payments to continue to the rest stop. "They're trying to control access," Marcus explained during an emergency meeting. "Cut off our trading network, isolate us, make us vulnerable. Can we stop them?" I asked. "Not without starting a war we might not survive. They're positioned on public road, technically outside our jurisdiction. We'd have to leave the rest stop to engage them. So we do nothing. We make it unprofitable." Marcus smiled without humor. "If traders can't reach us through the interstate, they'll find alternate routes. We spread word about back roads and side approaches. Carter's toll operation becomes pointless." We spent 2 days mapping every approach to the rest stop and distributing crude maps to known trading partners. Within a week, Carter's roadblock became irrelevant as people simply avoided it. His men eventually abandoned the position, probably realizing they were wasting resources for no gain. It was a small victory, but victories mattered psychologically. December brought the first major storm. 8 inches of snow in 12 hours, reducing visibility to nothing and dropping temperatures into single digits. We huddled in the main building, burning precious fuel to maintain survivable warmth. The storm lasted 3 days, trapping everyone inside and testing our social cohesion. Cramped quarters and forced proximity led to arguments over trivial matters that escalated quickly. Marcus had to physically separate two men fighting over blanket distribution before someone got seriously injured. This is what happens when people are scared and cold, Raymond observed while treating minor injuries from the fight. Stress breaks down social inhibitions. We need to address psychological health, not just physical survival. How? I asked, genuinely uncertain. We don't have therapists or mental health resources. Structure helps. Routine. Purpose. People need to feel useful and part of something larger. The trading post provides that for some, but not everyone. Henry took the suggestion seriously and organized what he called knowledge-sharing sessions during long winter evenings. People would teach skills they possessed. Marcus demonstrated basic rifle maintenance. Douglas the mechanic explained engine repair. Theodore visited to discuss agriculture and seed selection. The sessions gave people purpose and preserved knowledge that might otherwise be lost. They also built community bonds stronger than mere survival necessity. The infected population seemed to thin during the coldest weeks, perhaps because freezing temperatures affected their motor functions, or because many had simply degraded beyond the ability to move. We saw fewer shambling figures at the tree line, and the cutting parties reported encountering infected less frequently. It provided psychological relief even though we knew spring would likely bring renewed danger. Share this with someone who understands that survival isn't just about fighting monsters. It's about building something worth surviving for. Hit that subscribe button because what comes next will test everything we've created. Christmas arrived without celebration or acknowledgement. Just another cold day of survival. Some of the younger residents wanted to mark the occasion somehow, but I discouraged it. Celebrations required resources we couldn't spare and reminded people of everything they'd lost. Better to treat it as an ordinary day and avoid triggering grief. A trader arrived on December 27th with news that changed our strategic situation. His name was Vincent Crawford, a former insurance adjuster who'd been traveling between survivor communities gathering information. He'd developed a mental map of the region's inhabited areas and the groups controlling various territories. Carter's warehouse operation is bigger than you thought, Vincent reported while we sat in the break room reviewing his intelligence. He's got maybe 30 people under his control. Fortified position. Significant supply stockpiles. But he's having problems. What kind of problems? His leadership style is authoritarian, complete control through fear and violence. Works short-term but creates resentment. At least 3 people have escaped his compound in the last month. They're talking about conditions there, and it's not attracting recruits. So his growth is limited by his methods, I said, understanding the implications. Exactly. Meanwhile, your trading post model attracts people naturally. They come because they benefit, not because they're forced. Long-term, your approach is more sustainable. Unless Carter decides to take what we've built by force, David interjected. 30 armed men could overwhelm us regardless of how many traders support us philosophically. That's the risk. But attacking you costs him resources and potentially triggers retaliation from your trading network. He's trying to calculate whether conquest is worth the price. We need to make the price too high, Marcus said. Make it clear that attacking us means destroying the trading network entirely. If he can't control the trade flows afterward, there's no point in attacking. We spent the next week reinforcing that message through our trading contacts. Every conversation included subtle reminders that the rest stop's value depended on its independence and neutrality. Attacking us meant losing access to the region's primary information and resource exchange hub. It was psychological warfare, trying to deter aggression through strategic messaging rather than superior force. January tested us in new ways. Food supplies dwindled despite careful rationing. The garden plots were frozen and useless. Hunting became increasingly difficult as game grew scarce or moved to areas too dangerous to access. We relied heavily on trade, but fewer traders traveled during the worst weather. For 2 weeks in mid-January, we operated on minimal calories, maybe 1,200 per person per day when active men needed closer to 3,000. Hunger gnawed constantly, making people irritable and clouding judgment. "We're not going to make it to spring at this rate," Angelo told me privately during inventory review. His normally meticulous records had become increasingly grim. "The mathematics don't work. We have 28 residents now and declining food stocks. Even with trade, we're operating at a deficit. Reduce population. Send some people away to fend for themselves. That's a death sentence. We both know it. Then reduce consumption further. Starvation rations. Which means we're too weak to defend ourselves if Carter attacks, or to gather resources, or to survive infections." Angelo spread his hands helplessly. "I'm just reporting numbers. You make decisions." I called a community meeting that evening, something we did rarely because they often devolved into arguments. This time felt different. The hunger had made people quieter, more resigned. I explained the situation honestly, laying out the food shortage mathematics without softening them. Find new trading partners, develop new food sources, take risks we've been avoiding, or we accept that we might not all survive winter. Silence greeted my words. Finally, Theodore spoke up from where he sat near the fire barrel. "My greenhouse is producing, but barely enough for my own needs. If I had more seeds, more soil amendments, I could expand production, but I'd need help building new greenhouse structures. I know where there's a garden center," offered Kyle, who'd been quiet for weeks. "Place about 12 miles east. They'd have seeds, fertilizer equipment. It's in town, though, probably crawling with infected." "How many infected?" Marcus asked. "Don't know. Haven't been there since before everything collapsed. Could be dozens. Could be hundreds." "We're talking about a major operation then," Marcus said, his tactical mind already working through logistics. "Not a quick scavenging run. We'd need vehicles, armed escort, time to load supplies." "Significant potential reward," Patrick countered. "If we can establish expanded food production, we solve the long-term supply problem. Trading post becomes even more valuable if we're producing fresh food." The debate continued for an hour, weighing risks against benefits. Eventually, we committed to attempting the supply run once weather improved. It would require at least 8 men, 2 vehicles, and probably a full day of exposure to danger. We'd need weapons, ammunition, and luck. February brought a brief warming trend that melted some of the snow and raised everyone's spirits marginally. We used the opportunity to scout the garden center, sending Kyle and 2 others to assess the situation before committing to a full supply run. They returned with mixed news. The garden center was intact and appeared well stocked, but the surrounding town showed signs of significant infected presence. They'd counted at least 40 shambling figures visible from a distance, with probably many more inside buildings. "It's doable," Kyle reported. "But we'll need to move fast and make noise, which will attract every infected in the area." Once we're inside the garden center, we'll have maybe an hour before we're completely surrounded. Then we plan for extraction under pressure, Marcus said. Multiple vehicles. One group loads supplies, another maintains perimeter security. We stage everything for rapid departure. Douglas the mechanic reinforced 2 pickup trucks with metal plating welded to the doors and grills, crude armor that might protect against infected trying to break windows or grab occupants. Raymond prepared medical supplies for treating injuries. We stockpiled ammunition and checked weapons. Everyone understood this was the riskiest operation we'd attempted. The supply run launched on February 18th. Marcus led a team of 7 men in 2 vehicles, leaving at dawn to maximize daylight. I stayed behind to maintain the rest stop, watching them disappear down Route 89 with the same anxiety I'd felt during that first supply run months earlier. The difference was experience. Now I knew exactly how many things could go wrong. They returned 9 hours later, both trucks loaded with supplies, but one vehicle badly damaged. Steven Torres had a bite wound on his arm. The celebration at seeing loaded trucks died instantly when we saw Steven's injury. It happened during extraction, Marcus explained while Raymond examined the wound. We got swarmed faster than expected. Steven was covering our retreat when one of them got through. He kept fighting, bought us time to load the last supplies. My fault, but we got everything. Seeds, fertilizer, tools, soil amendments. Enough to expand Theodore's operation significantly. The skin's broken, saliva contact with blood. Classic infection vector. "How long do I have?" Steven asked quietly. "Based on previous observations, symptoms manifest within 6 to 8 hours. Full progression to death and reanimation within 12 to 18 hours total." "I'm sorry." Steven nodded slowly. His brother Michael stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. The rest of us waited for someone to make this easier. But there was no easier version of this conversation. "I want to see the greenhouse seeds planted before I'm gone," Steven said finally. "Want to know the run accomplished something. After that, follow the protocols we established. Michael, I need you to..." His voice cracked. "I need you to be the one. Can't be a stranger." What followed was the hardest evening of my life. We moved Steven to the maintenance shed and secured him according to quarantine protocols. Theodore, Kyle, and Patrick immediately began organizing the garden center supplies, working by lamplight to sort seeds and equipment. Steven watched through the shed window, occasionally offering suggestions about what Theodore would need. He was coherent for 7 hours, participating in planning the greenhouse expansion that he'd helped make possible. Around hour 8, the fever started. By hour 10, he was delirious. Hour 12 brought unconsciousness. Michael sat with his brother throughout, along with Marcus and Raymond. I stayed outside the shed with others who'd gathered, unable to help but unable to leave. Around 3 in the morning, Steven stopped breathing. Marcus checked for pulse, found none, and nodded to Michael. "Wait for him to turn," Raymond instructed quietly. "Could be minutes, could be an hour, but he will turn." Steven's body remained still for 47 minutes. Then his eyes opened, milky white and utterly empty of recognition. He lunged at Michael with inhuman speed. Marcus had to pull Michael back while Raymond used a steel bar to end what Steven had become. We buried him at dawn in the frozen ground near where we'd buried Peter Walsh. Michael spoke briefly about his brother's courage and sacrifice. Others added words about how the greenhouse expansion would honor Steven's memory. Then we filled in the grave and returned to the endless work of surviving. Comment below if you've ever lost someone and had to keep moving forward anyway. That's what survival really means. Subscribe because the next part shows how we turned grief into something permanent. The greenhouse expansion became a memorial project. Over the following 3 weeks, we used materials from the garden center run to help Theodore build 2 additional greenhouse structures on his property. The work was grueling, digging foundations in partially frozen ground, assembling frames from salvaged materials, installing the transparent panels that would trap heat and light. Theodore directed the construction with the patience of someone who'd spent decades coaxing life from difficult soil. "This will triple my production capacity," he explained while we secured the final panels on the second structure. "Enough vegetables to feed 50 people year-round, plus surplus for trade. Stephen's sacrifice made this possible." The completed greenhouses became a symbol of what the trading post could accomplish. We weren't just surviving, we were rebuilding agricultural capacity. Other survivors heard about the expansion and began proposing similar projects. A group living near a lake suggested developing aquaculture. Someone wanted to establish a lumber mill using a portable sawmill rig. The trading post was evolving from a meeting point into an economic coordination center for the entire region. March brought warmer weather and renewed infected activity. The creatures that had been dormant or slow during winter cold became active again, drawn by rising temperatures and possibly by the scent of living humans. Our perimeter watches reported increased sightings. Several cutting parties encountered infected in the forest. The danger we'd almost forgotten during winter's quiet reminded us that the primary threat hadn't disappeared. "We need to address the infected population systematically," Marcus proposed. "Clear them from the immediate area before they become a concentrated threat." "You're talking about offensive operations," I said. "We've always been defensive, fortifying and avoiding rather than engaging, which worked when infected were scattered and disorganized. But they're accumulating, following sound and movement toward the rest stop. Eventually, we'll have a horde at our gates." "How many are we talking about?" "Perimeter scouts estimate maybe 200 within a 5-mile radius, growing weekly as infected from further out wander into the area. We need to cull the population before it becomes unmanageable." We organized systematic clearing operations, sending armed teams to eliminate infected insectors radiating from the rest stop. It was dangerous, exhausting work that consumed ammunition we could barely replace. But Marcus was right. The infected population was becoming concentrated, drawn by the lights and activity of our community. Better to face them in small groups during organized operations than defend against a mass attack. The clearing operations revealed something unexpected. In a farmhouse 4 miles north, we found a group of 7 survivors who'd been isolated since the outbreak began. They'd fortified effectively, but had been too frightened to venture out or make contact with other groups. They knew nothing about the trading post or the broader survivor network we'd been building. There could be dozens of groups like this, Vincent Crawford observed when we brought the farmhouse survivors back to the rest stop. Isolated pockets that don't know about the trading network. We should actively search for them. "Why?" David asked. "More people means more mouths to feed. More people means more labor, skills, and resources," Vincent countered. "The trading post's value increases with network size. We should be expanding aggressively while we can." The debate sparked a broader discussion about the rest stop's purpose and future. Were we a survival camp trying to maintain a stable population, or a rebuilding effort actively seeking growth? The distinction mattered because it determined our strategies and resource allocation. I think we're building something bigger than we intended, Henry said thoughtfully. Started as a shelter, became a trading post. Now we're talking about organized expansion and population integration. We're essentially forming a government. Without calling it that, I interjected quickly. The moment we formalize power structures, we risk the authoritarian problems that plague Carter's operation. But informal structures create their own problems, David argued, returning to his political science training. Unclear authority, inconsistent enforcement, personality-driven decision-making. You've been the de facto leader since the beginning, Derek, but only because people accepted your authority informally. What happens when someone challenges that? Then we'll deal with it, I said, uncomfortable with the direction of this conversation. Or we establish clear systems now before crisis forces bad decisions, David pressed. Basic constitution, defined leadership roles, decision-making processes, rule of law instead of rule of personality. The discussion continued over several days, with strong opinions on all sides. Eventually, we compromised on a minimal framework, a council of 7 people representing different aspects of the community: security, medical, logistics, agriculture, trade, maintenance, and administration. The council would make decisions collectively, with my role as administrator coordinating rather than commanding. It wasn't democracy exactly, but it wasn't autocracy either. It was pragmatic governance designed for survival conditions. April brought new challenges and unexpected opportunities. A trader arrived from a community 60 miles south with news that a government remnant had established operations in a military base near the state capital. They were broadcasting on emergency frequencies, offering security and resources to survivors who could reach them. "Think it's legitimate?" Marcus asked, after hearing the report. "Could be," Vincent said. "Or could be a trap. Or could be legitimate but unable to actually deliver on promises. Only way to know is to make contact." "We should send someone," I said. "If there's functioning government, even fractional, we need to know." Could mean access to resources, information, military protection. Could also mean loss of autonomy, David warned. Government authority might supersede our independent operation here. They could requisition supplies, conscript people, impose regulations. Still worth investigating. We sent Vincent and Kyle as envoys, carrying trade goods and letters explaining the Mile 247 trading network. They departed in mid-April with instructions to assess the government remnant's capabilities and intentions. We didn't expect them back for at least 2 weeks. While they traveled, we continued expanding operations. Theodore's greenhouses were producing regular vegetable harvests. Douglas's repair shop had become essential infrastructure, maintaining vehicles for the entire trading network. Raymond's medical clinic treated everything from minor injuries to serious infections. The teacher Henry had accumulated enough documented knowledge to fill multiple notebooks: agricultural techniques, mechanical repair, medical procedures, security protocols, everything we'd learned through trial and error. "We should be sharing this information more broadly," Henry suggested. "Other communities are learning the same lessons separately. If we coordinate knowledge, everyone advances faster." "You're describing a library system," Patrick observed. "Central knowledge repository accessible to the network. The rest stop becomes not just a trade hub, but an information clearinghouse." We began systematically documenting everything: maps of safe routes, locations of resource caches, profiles of known survivor groups, technical knowledge, agricultural data, medical information. Henry organized it all into a reference system housed in the break room. Traders could consult the information freely and contribute their own knowledge. It was primitive but functional, a post-apocalyptic library serving an audience desperate for reliable information. May brought Vincent and Kyle's return with news that reshaped our understanding of the world. The government remnant was real, a coalition of military units, civilian administrators, and scientific personnel operating from a secure base. They controlled a territory of maybe 200 square miles and provided security for approximately 5,000 survivors. They had functioning infrastructure, agricultural operations, medical facilities, and organized military force. They want to expand, Vincent reported to an assembled crowd. Bring more territory under protected status. They are offering support to survivor communities willing to affiliate, military protection. What do they want in return? Marcus asked immediately. Allegiance, recognition of their governmental authority, contribution to collective defense. Basically, they want to rebuild centralized government with themselves as the legitimate authority. Are they legitimate? Someone called out. Depends on your definition. They've got military chain of command, some elected civilian leadership, attempts at democratic process. More legitimate than warlords like Carter, but less legitimate than pre-outbreak government. They're making it up as they go, same as us. The news sparked intense debate about whether to affiliate. Arguments extended across days as people weighed the benefits of government support against the loss of independence. Some saw affiliation as a path to genuine reconstruction. Others feared losing the autonomy that had allowed the trading post to thrive. This isn't a decision we can make unilaterally, I said finally. The trading post serves dozens of communities. We can't commit the entire network without broader consultation. We spent 3 weeks conducting outreach, sending representatives to every community in our trading network to discuss the government affiliation question. The responses varied dramatically. Some groups eagerly wanted government protection. Others valued their independence absolutely. Many fell somewhere in between, interested in support, but wary of control. We need a regional meeting, Vincent suggested. Representatives from every community. Let them discuss collectively and reach consensus. You're describing a constitutional convention, David said with barely suppressed excitement, forming a regional government through democratic process. I'm describing a meeting where people don't kill each other while deciding important things. I corrected. Let's not get grandiose. But David wasn't entirely wrong. We organized a gathering for early June, inviting representatives from every survivor community within 50 miles. 43 people attended, representing 27 distinct groups. They came to mile 247 rest stop because it was neutral ground, recognized infrastructure, and the logical meeting place for something this significant. The gathering lasted 3 days. People debated affiliation with the government remnant, trade protocols, mutual defense arrangements, resource sharing, and a dozen other issues. Arguments erupted constantly but rarely escalated to violence. The rest stop's culture of peaceful negotiation had spread through the trading network. Eventually, they reached consensus on a framework. Communities would remain independent, but coordinate through the mile 247 trading network. The network would establish formal relations with the government remnant as a collective rather than individual communities affiliating separately. It preserved autonomy while enabling cooperation. You've created a federation, David told me after the gathering concluded. Loose government structure with distributed authority. It's actually elegant. It's messy and informal and probably won't last, I replied. Most governments start that way. The fact that it exists at all is remarkable. June brought military units from the government remnant to establish a liaison presence at the rest stop. A captain named Brian Foster arrived with 4 soldiers, setting up a small office in one of the pavilions. Their presence was unsettling initially. Uniformed military in a place that had operated without official authority for months. But Foster was diplomatic, understanding that the rest stop's value lay in its independence and neutrality. "We're here to support, not control," Foster explained during our initial meeting. "The Federation model works for everyone. You maintain autonomy. We provide security and resources. Everyone benefits from coordination." "What happens when our interests conflict with your government's interests?" Marcus asked bluntly. "Then we negotiate like adults. The world's too broken for us to waste energy fighting over scraps. We need every survivor community functional and productive." They established radio communications allowing real-time coordination across the network. They provided intelligence about infected populations and hostile groups. They offered military support for major clearing operations. And they brought supplies from the government remnants' agricultural and manufacturing operations. Not charity. Carter's group tested the new arrangement in late June. They attacked a small farming community on the network's western edge, attempting to seize crops and supplies. The military liaison responded with a rapid deployment force, arriving within hours and driving Carter's men back. 2 of Carter's fighters were killed in the engagement. The rest retreated to their warehouse complex. "That's a statement," Marcus observed while we received reports of the confrontation. "Government remnants showed they'll defend affiliated communities. Carter has to recalculate now." Captain Foster visited the rest stop after the engagement. "Carter's operations are going to become untenable. We won't tolerate hostile action against network communities. He can affiliate peacefully or face military action. His choice. You're offering him terms. Everyone gets one chance. After that, we treat them as hostiles threatening regional stability." His compound went silent, conducting no external operations for weeks. Rumors suggested internal problems. People escaping, food shortages, declining morale. The authoritarian model that had seemed threatening months earlier was collapsing under its own dysfunction. July brought a delegation from Carter's compound requesting asylum. 8 people, mostly younger men, arrived at the rest stop asking for protection from Carter's increasingly erratic leadership. They reported food shortages, arbitrary punishments, and paranoid security measures that made life inside the compound unbearable. "Carter's losing control," one of the defectors explained. "He's blaming everyone for problems he created. Thinks people are plotting against him. Maybe they are now. I wouldn't know because I left before it got worse." We accepted the defectors and sent word to the government remnant about Carter's deteriorating situation. Captain Foster suggested waiting for the compound to collapse internally rather than forcing military confrontation. Within 2 weeks, more people escaped. By August, Carter's operation had disintegrated. The man himself disappeared, probably dead or wandered off alone. The warehouse that had seemed such a threat months earlier was absorbed into the trading network, its supplies distributed according to need. "That's how it ends sometimes," Marcus said while we inventoried the captured warehouse supplies. "Not with dramatic confrontation, but with whimper and dissolution. Bad leadership destroys itself." The trading post's first year concluded with a celebration in late September. We gathered in the parking lot where everything had started. Nearly 80 people from the core community, plus representatives from network communities. Theodore brought vegetables from his expanded greenhouses. Hunters contributed fresh meat. Someone had found a cache of preserved food suitable for a feast. We ate well for the first time in months, and people actually smiled. I stood watching the gathering, remembering the desperate confusion of that first day when 3 cars had idled in this lot, and the world was ending. Now those same parking spaces held vehicles from across the region, and the building that had been designed for bathroom breaks housed a functioning community. The rest stop had become exactly what we'd needed, a neutral place where people connected, traded, shared information, and rebuilt something resembling civilization. "Not bad for a year," Marcus said, appearing beside me with a plate of food. "You've built something worth protecting. We built it. All of us. You provided the foundation. Leadership that didn't try to dominate. Space for people to figure it out themselves. That's rare enough to matter." The celebration continued into the evening, and I let myself feel something like hope. The world was still broken, still dangerous, still filled with infected and threats and daily survival struggles. But here at mile 247 rest stop, at the junction where 2 roads crossed in forgotten countryside, something functional had emerged. Not perfect, not permanent, but real. The trading post would continue. The network would expand. The work of rebuilding would go on, one trade at a time, one connection at a time. One day survived leading to another, and maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. If this story showed you something about what humans can build even when everything falls apart, share it with someone who needs that reminder. Subscribe and comment with your thoughts because stories like this matter. They show us that the end of the world doesn't have to mean the end of hope.